All right. Good morning. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Jason Flame, host of the Master Motivation Podcast. Today is Monday, April 24th, 2023, and I'm excited for our guest today. We have a lot to talk about, so let me introduce him very quickly. This is Kenny Herrera, who is the creator of World Survival Self-Defense. He has been training and teaching martial arts for over 50 years. Master Herrera is a 9th degree black belt in Tang with the National Tang Congress, an 8th degree black belt in the Superfoot system under Bill Wallace, a 5th degree black belt in Chuck Norris system, a 3rd degree black belt in Joe Louis fighting systems, 1st degree black belt in Okinawan Shorin under John Korab, and a brown belt in Doce stick fighting under Anthony Kleeman. Kenny is an accomplished tournament competitor and instructor. He has led martial arts teams around the world to China, Russia, the Philippines, Sweden, and Finland. He was inducted into the United Kingdom Black Belt Hall of Fame and is the recipient of the 2022 United Fighting Arts Federation Wieland Norris Award. Kenny is also a musician playing drums and percussion, an environmental manager, a husband, a father, and a grandfather. Wow. That's an introduction. I love it. Great to have you here. Is there anything you're not a black belt in?
I don't know. I just love being a student and just, I've had some great mentors that just keep encouraging me to keep going. You're not done when you get the black belt. That's just the starting point,
Oh, I love when I hear that because it's music to my ears. It's something that I think we all as instructors preach in our classes and in our school all the time. As a matter of fact, I was just having this exact conversation with our students on Saturday, because we're getting ready for black belt testing. I said, listen, I know you guys have been waiting a long time for this and you've been working really hard, but I hate to tell you, now you're just beginning. This is a whole new start.
It is. And my instructor, Chuck Norris, told me that many years ago, and it's been true ever since. And, I just got to commend all of you fantastic instructors out there. I know a lot of the systems that I'm affiliated with, they have some fantastic people doing great things for this country and the world right now. The shape that we're in, it's so important to have those martial arts values, make our youth strong, and just teach all those leadership skills. And I just got a shout out to all those instructors that are doing great work out there. I see them all the time. It's so cool. It's a great community, the martial arts.
It really is. And one of the things that I love about social media is that we get to see all the great things that all these great instructors are doing out there. And, sometimes, people post a meme of, do your work in silence and do your work without letting anybody know what you're doing. And I have a hard time with that because I think that it's great for us to share what we're doing because it might inspire someone else to do something or to do more. And I think that you can definitely look at that from two different perspectives, but I agree with you. I love seeing what the martial artists are doing in the world. Could you imagine if every child was able to participate in martial arts every child participate in martial arts sometime in their life?
I think that would be fantastic. And, I talk to a lot of people around the world today. And if you're a parent and you have young children, if you're not teaching them martial arts, in my mind, you're being negligent as a parent. Today's world, there's so much violence and so much goofy stuff going on. Kids need to be aware of their environment and potential danger out there and how to use their body to protect themselves in a vigilant, responsible way. Because if they don't know that, they might go too far and really seriously injure somebody and not know their own strength or what they can do. So it's so important today, I think.
Absolutely. And there was a post that was floating around social media on Facebook that I shared just the other day. And it's the one of a martial artist in a uniform, but barely head above water. But it talks about how, swimming is an essential skill that every child should be taught how to swim. Otherwise, if you can't swim, you could potentially drown. And the correlation was that swimming is like martial arts, or martial arts is like swimming. Every child should do martial arts because as they go through life, whether it's bullying, it's a lack of confidence, it's the actual self-defense that they might need to use. If they don't have the tools, if they don't know how to do it, they're literally barely head above water and may potentially drown. So I love that post. And every time it gets shared around, I like to keep it going because I think that it's so important.
Yeah, it is. And, for the mentors and people that I've worked with, they've always said, well, what age should you start children at martial arts? And for me, it's at birth. I started my kids at birth, moving their little arms and legs and having them hit little pillows and how to walk the line on the carpet and how to balance, all those life skills and important attributes that you have in the martial arts to be able to punch and kick and do that. You teach them from birth. So it's just natural, and it's just a natural movement that they do and develop. You teach them manners, you teach them values, and all this starts early on in age. And a lot of us didn't get that growing up at first. My family came from Pasadena, and my parents had 3 children, 2 boys and a girl, and the 2 boys were about 7 and 5 and went off to school one day and got ran over by a car. Somebody was drunk, 7 in the morning, ran over him, killed my oldest brother, and tore my mom up. They wanted to move out. She couldn't handle being there, so they had another baby, which was me. I was his replacement, and they moved up to the Antelope Valley, Lancaster area, and my father opened up a nursery and landscape company with a partner. His partner played drums in a Dixieland band, and we used to have these parties and fundraisers at our house. My dad was active politically, so I got to see him playing drums, and I was fascinated. So he threw me some drumsticks, and I was beating on pots and pans and saved up Coke bottles and bought a snare drum and recovered it in tiger skin and sold it and bought a 3-piece drum set. And then the Beatles came out, and oh my gosh, I wanted to be Ringo Starr, and so I remember I said, Dad, I want a drum set like Ringo. He goes, oh, you want Zildjian cymbals? I said, yeah. He goes, well, get your tail out there and get a job. You can have anything you want in this world, but you got to learn to work for it. So I started, I got a paper route and finally bought my Ludwig 1966 Black Oyster Pearl drum set. I still have them like Ringo, and started playing in a band. And, we had a lot of family and cousins. Family was real important to me growing up. I had cousins, Diane and Danny and Cindy up in San Francisco Bay Area, and they played in a band. And I was just, they're a few years older than me. I just, I idolized them. And then my cousins down in Pasadena, the Swensons, Jimmy and Joel and Jerry and Jeff, they were just really cool guys. And so I had all these great influences growing up that I wanted to be like. And so I started playing in a band, and we'd play out at Edwards Air Base, and the girls would wink at me, and their boyfriends would want to beat me up. We'd have to get a security escort to get off the base without getting in a fight. And I thought, man, I don't like this. I want to learn to protect myself. So like little Daniel and Karate Kid, I got all these magazines and Bruce Tegner books and was jumping around, kicking. I met a guy, and they had a program at the YMCA, and he goes, nah, this isn't good. My brother just signed up at Sherman Oaks. So I met his brother and rode down with him. He was a few years older, a guy named John Schumann, and tremendous fighter, street fighter. And so I'd go down there, and a guy named Steve Smith signed us up. And today, Steve's one of my best friends. We've been training partners for over 50 years and been all around the world. And, I didn't know the people down there. I just wanted to learn to protect myself. And, Chuck Norris and Joe Louis were there, and Pat Johnson came in, and all these fantastic instructors. So, and then wherever Chuck was teaching, John and I would go around there. We have a phone tree. It'll be at Sherman Oaks tonight. Okay, we go to Sherman Oaks. It'll be in Santa Monica tomorrow. And so we kind of followed around to try and get the best of it. And it was just fantastic, a great time, growing up then. And Chuck encouraged me to compete. I didn't want to compete. I competed in snare drum. I'd go to these, I'd learn this music and go, these people be in suits and they have your music. And boy, it was real anxiety. And, you didn't want to make a mistake, embarrass yourself. So I'd practice, and they'd look up from the music and look at you. And boy, if you played the game, then, you could do a little better, whether you did the right music or not. And when Chuck encouraged me to compete, same thing. I felt that anxiety. I didn't know. My first tournament was a Four Seasons tournament, Mike Stone, and I'm standing there, and my heart's pounding, and I look at Chuck. I go, "Any words of wisdom?" And he goes, "Yeah, don't get hit." So very profound. So man, I'm moving around, and that taught me how to move. And I remember Pat Johnson standing there, and I said, "Anything, sir?" And he goes, "Every time he moves, hit him." So I said, "Do I kick? Do I reverse punch him?" Bam. So, it was a grand time in the tournaments. And I went out of state with the guys. We went to Albuquerque, New Mexico, a guy named John Thawley and John Schumann, a bunch of Bob Burbidge was there. And we, Bobby's sister, Kimmy, was competing. And she was going against this cute little blonde, and I thought, wow, this girl's good looking, and she's really good. So they tied, and I went and started talking to her, and I thought, man, this is the kind of girl I've always wanted to pictured myself with to get married. So we started talking and exchanged numbers, and I called her, and John and I packed up the car and went to Colorado for a tournament, Rocky Mountain Nationals, and she won, and she was a top competitor, Cindy Peterson. And we started talking on the phone, developed a relationship, and coming back and forth, and I'd travel with her to her competitions, and I'd come out with a medal and holding all these trophies. Everybody thought, wow, that guy's really good. They were all hers, first in fighting, first in team, first in form. So yeah, she was quite a force in the martial arts in the 1970s. She trained with Alan Malaya de Coscos in Colorado.
Wow.
So
I love all this this history and background, as I'm sure our audience is loving this and eating it up. Where we have a growing audience as we're talking now. So if you are watching, would love to know where you're watching from, who's watching, and by the way, if you have any questions, anything that you want to ask Kenny, please join in the conversation. We want to hear your comments and your questions as well. So I want to back up a little bit, though. You said something that I think is, really important, and you just almost kind of glossed over it. But when you're talking about you wanted to get this drum set, you wanted these drums, your dad looked at you and said, well, go get a job. You can have anything you want. Right. And, I can remember my father saying the same thing to me. We come from a different generation, but I think within the same morals and values, yeah. Right? And that was what my dad told me. Hey, you want something? Go work for it. Yeah. You can have anything you want. And so that was instilled in you very, very early on. Go ahead.
I'm sorry. No, I was just going to say, you bring up a great point, Jason. As we grow up, we have role models around us. And sometimes later in life, we go, yeah, maybe some of those role models weren't so great after all. It could have been a teacher, a neighbor, whoever, coach, influence. And I'm blessed. I had some really good people right out of the gate, and they steered me in the right direction. My father being one, and, my family. And then John Schumann, having a training partner that just, you need that accountability partner, somebody that when you don't feel like training, that come on, we're going. Mm-hmm. He'd show up Saturday morning. We're going to a tournament. Well, dude, I got to mow the lawn. We'll do that when you get back. Let's go to a tournament. We every weekend we're going somewhere, and you need an accountability partner. And then when we started traveling in tournaments, and then I had an opportunity. I was really in a struggle, and again, Chuck Norris stepped in. I had a chance to go on the road and travel around playing professionally. I just got married, and Chuck said, well, go for your career. Karate will be here your whole life. You could do this your whole life. So take advantage of those. You only have those career windows for a short time. So go take advantage of it. So I went on the road playing music, dragging my wife around the country for, trying to be a rock star and playing professionally and, working for an agent. And I mean, we had a great time. My friend John would fly out to wherever we were and train with me. And Chuck said, whatever town you're in, go introduce yourself as my student and tell them you want to train there and pick up what you can, learn, bring it back, but you got a strong base, so just base it off that. And most of the time, people were wonderful. Sometimes they thought, oh, you're from LA, you think you're tough, and, we're going to show you. Our Kung Fu's better than you. But I met a guy in Ohio, JT Will. He was one of the top referees back then, and he was fantastic. And I started teaching, and I signed some students up with him, and we just had a great relationship. And I came back in 78, had decided to settle down, come off the road for just a short time. I was only going to come back for about a year and then go back out. And then John didn't want his school. He asked me to take over his school. So I moved it, started teaching, and then tested for my black belt in 78 because I was back now. And then we had our first black belt conference in 1979. And Chuck brought Bill Wallace in to teach his style of kicking, that universal knee position stuff. Mm-hmm. And I thought, wow, this is so cool. That was the first time I'd, started working with Bill. So it was really cool. We developed a relationship, and, he went on for a long time, and then we reconnected and through Joe Lewis, and it was just fantastic. So for about the past 10 years, I've got an opportunity to travel to the UK with Bill. It was, just bizarre how it all happened. I was going over there with a music artist, a guy named Al Stewart, Year of the Cat, to do a benefit concert. And so I've been blessed not only in martial arts, but to have some great, other mentors in music. One of my, and again, Chuck Norris influenced my whole life. I met a lot of my music friends through him. They had a music studio years ago called TMF, Too Much Fun. And they used to record some of his soundtracks there. And I was there working on a project, and I met a girl singer. She said, my friend's coming off the road playing with Sheena Easton, plays sax player, and she hooked us up. We met. We've been playing together ever since. A guy named Mark Masisso, one of the fantastic musicians. And so he'd been working with a guy, Al Stewart. So they invited me over to play, and we did this benefit concert. And before I left, I was working with Bill, and he goes, well, I'm going to be in England. Come meet up with me. So I took the train and met up with him, and he goes, hey, we're going to Cambridge next, come. I go, well, I got a gig in between. So I was trying to balance the music and do martial arts. And then he was going back the next year. So I was playing the next year. So I was able to time and work some music and do both. So it was really blessed. And Mark had introduced me. We did a recording project, met a guitar player named Peter White that used to work with Al. And, again, one of the most phenomenal musicians in the world, Peter White, and have the opportunity to work with him, play percussion. I still do, but having those, there's so much similarity. There's a schema where things line up, no matter which art form that you do, that you take from one art form and just blend it into another. And that's why doing different martial arts, there's so many fundamental values, whether it's in life and working, and in the art form, it's mastering breathing, that control, the balance, the focus, the timing, being able to be in the crosshairs of being on target. So it was fantastic with that because there's so much similarities in the music. And, when I came off the road in 78, I wanted to go back on the road playing. My wife says, you need a job. So our income, because we'd had my first child, my beautiful daughter, Stephanie. So I went to work for Southern California Edison. And my dad had friends that worked there, and they'd always encourage me. And I had applied back in 74 when I first got married, and they put a freeze on hiring because of the energy crisis. So that's when I went on the road playing. So I applied when I came back in 78, and I got hired. And after just a few months there, they said, hey, we won the Substation Award. Do you still got your band? And I said, yeah, because they knew I was a professional musician. And they said, we want to hire your band. So they brought all these vice presidents, and they liked the band. So they said, hey, we're starting these recognition dinners. So for the next 7 years, I did a dozen gigs a year for Edison all around the Southern California and Big Creek and the system. So it was really cool. I felt so blessed to be able to blend my talents, with music and martial arts, and then into the utility industry. And after a few years of, having a studio and trying to balance it all, and I had the opportunity to meet some fantastic people and train, through Chuck Norris. He brought the Muchados and Gracies in, and they used to come up to my school. I had a school in Lancaster, and just had some, again, phenomenal students. They were way smarter and more gifted and talented than me. And by saying that, they asked some great questions. So they always kept me on my toes to go research and find out more and bring them more. And we brought out Ernest Hart to teach self-defense skills, and Chip Wright, one of the best martial artists all time, came down and trained, and we just had some great people. And, the relationships that you develop with those people are still current today. Roger Quinlan and his wonderful wife, Kelly, and Colleen Hodgkins, we still train together, monthly to go through all our 25 forms so we don't forget them. Because as you mature in life, you tend to forget things as well as they are. So they're perishable skills. If you're not keeping them up, you're losing them. So it's so important to just keep training. And I'm sure you see so many people, well, yeah, back in the day I was this and that, and they just sit there and they don't do anything now. So I'm still active. I still train. I still compete. I still do all this stuff. And, having those accountability partners, Steve Smith, Roger Lacombe, to where Bill Wallace, and to where I train with Bill every week. Through the pandemic, he started teaching online. So I mean, we have Superfoot Dojo every Wednesday evening, and it's fantastic. You're training with people all over the world, and he's watching your technique and holding you accountable. And that's the way you get better. We're all in this world together. We have to help each other out and hold each other accountable. So it's fun.
It's one of the things that I love about martial arts. And really, when you get into anything that you're passionate about, you learn that the more you know and the more you learn what you don't know. So it keeps you on that edge of wanting to learn more and keep going and keep growing. I love what you said about, being able to tie together a couple things. You were able to tie in, playing drums and playing music and martial arts. Those two things kind of going hand in hand. In my life, I was always a huge professional wrestling fan, as you saw from the opening video. So I was able to tie the wrestling and the martial arts together, which was a lot of fun. And you're right. As we're going through this training and going through life, you meet so many people that, God puts people in your life for a reason.
Absolutely.
And I have been so lucky to create so many relationships, great friends through both martial arts and professional wrestling.
Sure.
And I know you brought up some of the people that are watching. Kelly Quinlan is watching right now. Margaret Oldham is watching from England, and we have
that's my cousin. I'm going to see her next week. I'm so happy. Again, those, like you said, God puts things in your life. One Tuesday evening years ago, my wife and I were sitting there watching TV, and the phone rang, and this lady was on the other end. She goes, "Hi, I've been researching Ancestry.com, and we're cousins." And she was in Saskatchewan, Canada. And she goes, "I'm coming out next week to San Diego to see my sister. Would you like to meet?" So my sister and I went and met, and we got talking. I was getting ready to go to England. She says, "Well, we have a cousin in England, Margaret." And turns out she was 10 miles from where I was playing. So I contacted, and she came to the gig, and we just hit it off, and we've been dear friends and family ever since. And so every year I go to England, I see her, make it a point that we get together. So
that's awesome. Well, Mr. Lacombe is watching right now. He says hello. And we also have someone watching from Germany as well. So we got people watching from all over the world today. I want to talk a little bit more about, your time in growing up in Lancaster, in Antelope Valley. I came up with Dennis Ichikawa, right? He's been my instructor since 1985.
Phenomenal person, martial artist. I love Dennis. I used to compete at his studio, his tournaments early on.
He would often talk about John Schumann and talk about, out in Lancaster, he used to tell us when he teaches the Nyanshi forms, he does not forget to tell a story about John Schumann, how he had to fight, 3 or 4 guys off of a chain link fence. Any
carnival. That was at a carnival. It was at the carnival. Him and his girlfriend at the time, he went up, it was at the end of the evening. He went to buy her a Coke. She was thirsty, wanted a Coke. And they wouldn't sell it to her. They said, "Nah, we're closed." He says, "Come on, it's for my girlfriend." And he was trying to be nice, and they were just real belligerent about it and started, using foul language at him. And then 2 of the guys kind of went up behind him. They were just angry and wanted to do something. Next thing you know, it's a melee, and John's got his back to the fence and got guys coming at him from all directions, and all those close-in fighting skills came out. John was a pretty tough boy. He was my training partner, and man, he had fast hands, and I was always banged up. But, trouble seemed to follow him around. He was a trouble magnet, it seemed like. And it was interesting. A lot of stories about John. But he was a fantastic person and just a great guy and good martial artist. Very good martial artist. I'll never forget at Dennis's tournament. John and I both won our weight divisions and had to fight. And I bowed out to him, and he goes, "You're not bowing out to me. We're going to fight." I go, "Dude, it's not going to be good," because I was feeling pretty good at the time. And but anyway, it was. I'll tell you in private all about that. It was fun.
Again, I've heard stories. I don't believe that I'd ever met Mr. Schumann in person, maybe at a tournament when I was much younger, but lots of stories. And as I was talking with Mr. Lacombe The last video we did, we have a long history of, we're from the same area here. We even talked about the fact that my mom went to the same school that he went to at one point. And it's interesting how all of us in the Tang group are somehow related to everybody, right? So I know that, Mr. Ichikawa started with Chuck Norris and Pat Johnson, and he was hired by Bob Wall to run the Sherman Oaks School back in the day. What are your memories of Mr. Ichikawa, and what is your relationship with him in the early days?
Huge respect. I just thought he was terrific. He had a great command of his teaching style. He was very precise and open-minded that, it could be a couple different ways. And this is the way that he chose to do stuff. Because, this is a martial art. It's an art. And there's more than one way to do something. So the main thing is, as a student, whether I'm doing music or martial arts, utility, environmental business, you have three questions. What do you want me to do? Why do you want me to do it? And how do you want it done? So, I guarantee you, when you're in Pat Johnson's class, he wants it done a certain way. So when in Rome, do what the Romans do, And I remember one time talking to Chuck Norris, I said, I don't understand. I go to the South Bay, and they do it one way, and I come to the Valley, and they do it another way. Which one's right? He goes, well, they're both right. There's different applications of how you're going to use these things and why we do them. He always had a great answer. So I just thought that was so cool. About the thing with John Schumann, John was a master carpenter. So we would go down, and these guys that were opening up studios like Bob Burbage and Brett Gold back in the day, John said, come on. And we'd grab our tools and we'd go down there and we'd frame in a doorway or build them an office or remodel a bathroom. We'd do something, and in exchange for, we're bartering so we could go train there. And we did that, Sherman Oak, we did that all over. So it was a pretty cool skill that John had that I could benefit from. And, those early days of the black belt testing, I mean, they were fantastic. And, one time down in Orange County, Chuck took us out on a dinner cruise after the black belt test. So we cruised around the harbor in Newport there. And, you talk about Doce Ichikawa, Ron Ponell. Ron and I are dear friends. Ron's a musician, bass player, plays many different instruments, multi-talented. But we were playing in a band at Sherman Oaks. We'd have parties at Sherman Oaks, and Ralph Johnson from Earth, Wind and Fire was there, and Chris Hillman from the Byrds, and it was just so cool. And we were playing at Chuck's house one time for an after party, and Linda Ronstadt came walking in and with her band, and I remember we said, hey, would you like to come up and sing? And she goes, no, I'm good. But it was so much fun. Richard Norton was close friends with Chuck, and he was bodyguarding for her back then on getting ready for a world tour. And, it was so cool. It was very, very cool.
Now, walk me through your lineage again. Your very first instructor was who?
I worked with John Schumann, and we went to Sherman Oaks and Mike Bissell.
Mike Bissell, okay.
Yeah, so Mike Bissell was teaching classes there. Pat Johnson was there. And it just depended on which night that we went on who was teaching. But Pat Johnson was there, and then Chuck would teach there wherever he had just started doing the acting lessons. So Pat Johnson had taken over all of his private lessons. So I know he was teaching Steve McQueen, and he asked me. I was free during the day, so being a musician, so I'd come down there and go, would you come down and work with Steve? So I'd be his partner for his red belt testing and, different workouts. We'd practice our one step, and he was just a wonderful guy. I mean, it was pretty special.
What are some of your favorite memories of your early training?
I'd say the tournaments. I mean, the classes were great. They were very hard. And I remember one time, people had it. There's different motivations why people go to learn. There was some guys that lived around that Sherman Oaks area that had come from foreign countries that were scared to death of being beat up. So they would get off work and come and take a day class and then go back to work to get their training in. Some of them didn't wash their uniforms, or their hands would be greasy and they'd get them all over your uniform. So, Pat Johnson was very strict about, hey, you're going to come in a clean, washed uniform, and you're going to wash your hands and do your nails. And, and that's where a lot of those rules that we have today, came from. And you saw Karate Kid. I mean, you saw the instructor there. A lot of those was Pat Johnson's, toughness that came out through those characters. And, he was just a brilliant, masterful instructor. We learned so much from him. When Chuck started doing the films and being gone so much, Pat Johnson took over the organization and was teaching. And Raul Hernandez was a big influence. He started creating the UFAF forums back then. And we got to do some posters. I know Roger did a poster. I did one of UFAF 3. And it was a special time. And then, we went through a division of the organization that created some strife. It was, I felt like a kid in a divorce, mom and dad breaking up, and it was very difficult for a lot of folks. And you don't want to choose, So we navigated through that. And currently today, I'm the region director of Region 1 for United Fighting Arts Federation, the Chuck Norris organization here in California, Hawaii, where it all started. And there's some, we're all from the same family. I mean, you can be a cousin or this and that, but, Chuck Norris started it all. And Pat Johnson and Bob Burbage and Dennis Ichikawa and all the fantastic people, Steve Smith. I mean, it was the epicenter of martial arts here, where a lot of that grew. Bill Wallace, those guys, Bill and Chuck and Joe, were such close friends and training partners, and they were the pioneers that developed a lot of this stuff, and they developed it out of necessity. Bill using his left leg because his right leg didn't work. He was in a cast, so while everybody's doing 10 and 10, he's doing 20, getting twice the effort out of it. And but a kick's a kick, a punch is a punch. The energy source, whether it's snapping or thrusting or spinning, the centrifugal, they're all the same. And I think that's what's so brilliant about those masters like that, Chuck Norris and Bill Wallace and Joe Louis. They don't want you to be like them. They want you to be the best version of you that you can be. Martial arts is about, becoming a better person, not just how good you can kick or do this and that, but to be a better person than you were before. And you get up each day and you strive for that. And, Chuck's wife, Gina, is just an absolute wonderful person. And the pursuit of health that both of them are doing now, I'm benefiting from. They have their roundhouse morning kick with all the right supplements that, it helps me in the morning. I get up and instead of being groggy or this and that, and they're concerned about health. And as you mature, I'm blessed, knock on wood. I'm probably one of the few guys in my age group out there that still has their original parts. I mean, a lot of my friends have new hips and shoulders and knees, and some are on their second and third versions of them. But, Chuck told me early on, don't kick a heavy bag because you're going to damage your lining in your hip socket, And so a lot of the training, we're really focused more on health today. We're not living in medieval Asia where, people would deform their bodies because they knew they were going to die in battle within a year or so. So, it's we want to preserve our body. Chuck's mom's over 100, and he's 83, and these guys, and Bill Wall's 77. He kicks like a 20-year-old. These guys are phenomenal. So as we learn more, we learn how to preserve our bodies more. And Bill is an incredible, he's got a master's in kinesiology. We don't stretch. We teach the body to relax and the muscles to relax. And, it's just a different thought process of how we do that. You mentioned wrestling. I learned so much from wrestling. I had 3 wonderful children, my daughter, Stephanie, my son, Tony, and Craig. And they got beautiful families now, and their wives. My daughter's husband, Alberto, and Tony and Becca have 3 beautiful little girls, little daughters, and Livy and Millie and Hattie now. And Craig and Melissa have Callie. And it's so cool to see their families and how they're bringing their children up, because all 3 of those are martial artists. And I just wanted to be a dad. I'd take my kids to flag football, and and then all of a sudden the coach is like, here, help me carry the gear bag, and here's a hat, and you're my new assistant coach, and here's the clipboard. I won't be here tomorrow. And next thing you know, you're going to classes and you're working with kids, and you're working with kids just like you are, whether it's on the mat or out on the football field.
Mm-hmm.
And then the kids get to high school and they start wrestling, and the wrestling coach I start training his kids, and he's going, man, if my wrestlers knew this, how to breathe and these X angles and all this nerve pressure points you're doing, would you come in and help them do a program? So next thing you know, I'm coaching wrestling, and I'm with some of these, Mike Young, who's one of the top wrestling coaches of all time here, and some phenomenal other people, a guy named Al Chronister, a guy named Del King. I'm learning so much from these guys about, I'm used to competing where it's a lot about winning and how are you going to be prepared and this and that. And I remember I was coaching with these guys, and they go, our guy was doing an illegal move on the other kid. And he goes, timeout, ref, our guy can't do that. And he was for the other kid. And I go, what are you doing? He goes, no. And having that reverence of the sport. And that's the same thing with the reverence of martial arts, preserving that reverence and that legacy that the pioneers, that these guys built and created. It's our responsibility today, these instructors today, to don't let the kids and the students slip through the cracks. Hold them accountable. Hold them to that high standard that we came up with, not to be punishing, but to preserve that legacy. And it's the right thing to do. It's the values, and I think that's just so important today that in some studios, they overlook that. It's preserving that legacy. It's the same heritage, that you grow up with your family. Hey, we don't do that in our family. We don't put our feet on that. We do something different here. And so I think that's so important. One of the opportunities I had, with families, I have nieces and nephews. My nephew, Rob Newkirk, started training with me, and it helped keep him accountable through high school. And we started teaching and got him involved teaching. I had one of my students come in and go, you can really help folks. You need to bottle this with the self-defense. So he said, I want to invest into a video. So I said, okay. So he said, we need somebody to promote it. And Chuck Norris was doing his own video at the time. He goes, well, my friends in Hollywood. So I got together with them, and they go, well, how about Bruce Jenner? I go, he'd be great. Olympic athlete. So we got involved in a project with Chris and Bruce Jenner. Chris wanted to be in it. So we did a 1-hour self-defense video with Bruce and Chris, where I teach Chris self-defense, and got all my students involved reenacting the how to use the techniques on the street. So, I mean, that was fun too.
Yeah.
And, still going.
Well, I love that, you talk about the standards and the reverence for the art, as martial arts has become, let's just say more mainstream, when you were coming up in the arts, schools were very small. It wasn't
Sparse.
thought of as a business, nearly at all. And that's why a lot of, schools went out of business and couldn't flourish. But, now you have a martial arts school on every street corner, and you've got every gimmick, and you've got every way to just make it enticing. I love the fact that more people are doing martial arts. I love the fact that people are being introduced to all the things above and beyond the kicking, punching, blocking, of course, right? Self-defense is important. It's the one thing that we do different than anyone else, any other sport, right? But the focus, the discipline, the respect. But, it's kind of lacking. It's lacking in society in general, morals, standards, that reverence for, kids would never talk back to their grandparents. They would never talk back to their parents. I mean, if I ever talk back to my parents, it would be the ass whooping I would never forget. And there was a little bit of fear in martial arts for me the same way. If I ever talked back to my instructor the way that I see some things happening today, man, I mean, it put your gear on and we'll figure that out. And so now I just feel like we see things, being done differently, but I appreciate the fact that, accountability, holding people accountable, holding them to a higher standard. Martial arts being about being the best version of yourself, right? And all of that, I think, is so important.
Yeah, you're spot on. And it seemed like when we were coming up, they would try and make the classes so hard to see if you'd quit.
Yes.
Like, you won't be back tomorrow.
That's
You're
right.
not tough enough, and they'd challenge you. And it wasn't about money. I mean, half the kids were doing chores around there to get to pay. And, and that was the mentality I always had. I was never dependent full time on my income through using martial arts. I'm blessed that I went into the utility industry to feed my family and take care of my benefits and insurance and all that. And there again, I had some wonderful mentors in the utility business. And I learned so much there that I could apply it to the martial arts. An example, I had a vice president, Jim Kelly. We're dear friends today. And working with Rob Reed, Ken Maddock, Don Blumenshine, and Ken DeVore, these guys that were just brilliant. They're so talented. And I'm thinking, gosh, how can I glean from this? You got to have a vision. Jim was visionary. You got to have a vision of what you want to do. And Ken was a strategist. He could create a strategy based off that vision. And then Rob was great about putting together a plan, a tactical plan of how you're going to execute. And then I was executor. I could get it done. Because I grew up, get her done, So the vision, do a great concert. Well, what do? Well, you got to have a band and you need equipment and you got to have a strategy of how you're going to do that. Tactical plan, put together a set list, learn the songs, get the right musician, then go execute, and then adjust along the way. It's the same strategy. That same system happens when you're fighting and learning martial arts. So we are big on what we call processing. When you're standing there, you hear the command, you have an intake of information, you formulate what you're going to do, and you respond to it. And you can do it visually. Hey, see how somebody's weight is when you're fighting? You do the same thing auditorily, but it's learning that processing. And you teach that to children very young. And it transfers, those are transferable skills that go into whether you're going in the medical field, you want to be a fireman, a policeman, military, all those are skills that progress up. We used to teach it on the football field. A lineman comes up to the line. He sees, is he in the gap, on the gap, or outside? He processes it, and then he goes to respond to it, and he knows what he's going to do. So you eliminate all that questioning that happens. And, sometimes you see it in sports all the time. You do this, you do this, you do this, to where they're so paralyzed, they're afraid to move. They don't use their natural ability.
Right.
Where just relax, go hit them. What do I do? Just go hit the guy and use your natural instincts to let these come out. And sometimes we overthink things to where we paralyze ourselves. We do the same thing in life. Should I do this? Should I do that? You overthink it to where just go do something.
Right.
Just do it. You don't see it and do it. Just do.
Well, I'm a huge John Maxwell reader. As a matter of fact, I read a John Maxwell daily reader every day. And I love that you brought up, vision, right? Yeah, because you get leaders that focus more on managing and all these tasks, like you're saying, instead of having a vision and leading from that vision. And so I just read that actually yesterday. It was part of how different leaders lead. But I love that. And in martial arts, I've brought so much. We talk about our kids. I brought so much into my martial arts program, watching my kids grow up. I taught martial arts from the time I was 17, maybe a little bit younger, helping, but really leading classes at 17 until my daughter was born. I was teaching a certain way. And I remember just the things that I would do, and looking back now, having learned from my kids and how my kids responded to how I was teaching, how I started teaching differently, how I learned from them, and then using that to enhance the program, and using that to help, again, go back to what you were saying, is help people become a better version of themselves and not doing something just because that's the way that it's always been done, right? We can still keep up the integrity of the art, but I might just take a different approach to get that vision across to them and keep them longer, right? You talked about we used to beat people up to get them to quit because they're just not tough enough, right? We lost a lot of good people by doing that. There were so many people that would have benefited so much more, probably more than the people that stuck around. Those people that quit, that they would have been much stronger had we had a better way of maybe, potentially teaching them.
We've improved so much, and this is an art form where there's continuous improvement. When I started, we had to learn from books or go learn from somebody. John Schumann was one of the first visionaries that I was around, because we borrowed my mom's Super 8 film camera to film our tournaments. I still got some of these videos so we could watch back. And then instead of watching on the screen, we bought an editor where we could go and see in slow motion our technique and where we needed to improve. So that's having vision. Today, kids are the way the world is, same with music. When we grew up, we had to learn from somebody and hope we got it right and write it down to make sure we got it. Today, you can learn from any of the top people anytime in the privacy of your own home, have it on video, watch it back and forth. You got manuals, you got I used to drive with John from Lancaster 2 to 3 days a week, from Lancaster to Sherman Oaks, take class and then drive back, go to school or go to work and do that, because we didn't have a studio on the corner. Finally, one of the guys opened up a school where we could, be here a couple of days a week and have a place to train up here and not have to drive. So, today people are very fortunate, and we get spoiled, and people get so caught up with social media and TV to where they don't even leave their home or their room to go outside and experience a lot of this other. You're seeing some of these. Another guy I had the opportunity to train with, Boss Rutan, is, as men, we need to be leaders. We need to be strong leaders, and we need to clean up our act and be a good role model for our own kids, grandkids, and others that we lead and teach. And, take a cold shower once in a while. Do that, and start appreciating some of these things that we take for granted. Shut the TV off in your computer except for work. Start doing some of these things. Practice writing with your offhand and do things to develop that other side. We become so spoiled and look for all the easy way out. Walk to the market instead of taking the car for a change and see just a different perspective and a different vision. And it's really enlightening. And, being around some of these superstars in the martial arts, they're real people. They're real people that do common things just like all of us do, but they do it with a different attitude. They do it respectfully and appreciative, and they appreciate the opportunity to take the trash out. They appreciate the opportunity to mow the lawn. They appreciate the opportunity to say hello or open the door for someone or say thank you and make somebody's day. And it's about giving back. You talked about reading. Chuck used to encourage us to read, Andrew Carnegie and different stuff. And still today, we encourage our students to read and baseline it, come back and communicate, talk about these things. What'd you get out of it? What's good? What's bad? How can you base that on this value system that we do? Mm-hmm. And it's very rewarding like that. I read a book, Abundance, that kind of changed the way I thought about things. We as humans, we're very, very selfish. I got this for me. What about the other people? Start giving out. And these top martial artists, they're very giving. Joe Louis, brilliant, would give you anything that you wanted. Have the opportunity to train with a champion, and Bill Wallace, Chuck Norris, the same way. They're open with this stuff. Some people, they'll only teach you so much. They always want to hold something back. The good instructors, they'll tell you everything. They want you to be better. They want your students to be better than you. My students are way better than me. And that's the way it should be. My kids are better and smarter and more educated than I am. And that's what you want. You want that continuous improvement. But at the same time, you don't want to quit. I'm still working on myself. I'm still training. I'm still reading. I'm still trying to get better every day at everything that I can, mentally, physically, and emotionally with that. And that's why it's so important. That's our responsibility to God and his being creatures here.
I love it. Let's before we get too far, let's talk about this Karate Kid experience. You had a chance to be involved, as a few people I know have been involved in that movie. But I mean, because you had a firsthand relationship with Pat Johnson. Talk about being part of the movie and being part of part 3.
Yeah. So Pat was awesome. I mean, I love the man like a father. And my father was killed when I was 23. So Pat and Chuck became father figures in my life. And, we talked all the time, and he encouraged me, gave me advice, and he had an opportunity when he was doing Karate Kid to bring me in. And he would set up the fight scenes, and I'd warm up the actors and teach them how to do some of the moves because they really didn't have any karate experience. So primarily for the tournament scenes. And so it was a great experience. And then we did number 2, and I got to focus primarily spend extra time with Yuji Okamoto. He played the nephew, the bad guy in that.
Mm-hmm.
And he was probably about a green belt level in martial arts, but Pat would do some pretty sophisticated stuff with him. So, it took a little more flexibility and working on keeping his body up and that whole posture and all that stuff. So it was really fun. And then in 3, he goes, I'll get you a part. So I grew a beard and I got to be an instructor. And, the film industry, you spend all this time, hurry up and wait, and they film all this stuff and they show you the pre-screening. And you go, oh, wow, cool. I'm going to be in that scene. And, I got some dialogue and this and that. And then by the time they cut it all up and shrink it down, like, where was I? Where'd I go? In some of the scenes. So it was fun. It was a great experience. And I mean, that movie changed the industry. I mean, it exploded after that. Started seeing studios coming all over, and then it died down for quite a bit of time. And then the revival of Cobra Kai, I mean, that it brought it back, and it was just a cool experience. Chad McQueen was on that, and I knew Chad from working with his dad, and those cars, they were part of Steve's collection. The old truck Miyagi drove, that was Pat's truck that Steve McQueen had given him, and just some cool stuff. And then Pat became very popular as a stunt coordinator and started doing other film projects, and I got to dabble in some of that. I worked with Joe Louis and Force 5. I got Benny Urquidez killed me in a fight scene, so in the jail, that was really fun. Benny's one of the top all-time greats. Just a wonderful man. I just saw him recently in Atlantic City, and every time I take a seminar from him, I always pick up some new nugget of information, and it's so cool like that. I've been working with him for years. And then Roger Lacombe, I don't know if he told you, him and I got to work on an episode of Family Matters years ago, and the Halloween show where Urkel thinks has a dream sequence. He's in a bank robbery and thinks he's Superman and comes up and beats up the guy. So it was fun working that stuff, a little different, and all good stuff. And then the Ninja Turtles, when that came out, right, the grand opening, they did a grand opening at Universal, and they took the parking lot and made it the sewer, and they got all the pizza places all over town to make pizzas, peanut butter and jelly pizzas and all these different kinds. So they asked me to come in and with some of my black belts, and we did dressed as foot soldiers. I was dressed as Shredder, and we did some magazine layouts, and then we did some big fight scenes there, and MC Hammer. It was a lot of fun. Just wow. Really, really cool stuff. I've been so blessed to experience that.
I was going to say, what a fun experience just to have, and to be surrounded by, all of the movie stars and the high level martial artists. It's just, you kind of soak it all in, and you have some great stories to tell, some great memories, but most of all, great lessons to share with your students and to share with other people, which I think is amazing. Guys, we're getting ready to wrap up in just about 5 minutes. So if you are still watching, I know we still have such a great audience today. If you have any other questions, anything else you want to add, we've had Roger and Kelly Quinlan on today. We've had Roger Lacombe on today. Anybody else, if you have any questions, any stories you want to hear, we got 5 more minutes. So as we kind of close, you know, what is your martial arts life now and moving forward? What are your current goals as a martial artist? What are your current aspirations to achieve?
That's a great question. You know, my wife used to ask me that. Why do you spend so much time doing this still? You know, and all that. And it's, I want to continue to improve my health. You know, it's harder the older you get to stay in shape and cut pounds and be in shape. I want that health. I want to live to be over 100 so I can see my kids and grandkids. I show that responsibility. I still have students that I've been with. I've been their instructor, so I want to be a good role model for them. I want to continue. I'm working on a black belt in Filipino stick fighting, you know, with Anthony Kleeman.
Got him at the desk. All right.
Yeah, he's one of the top martial artists in the world, in my opinion. And I'm blessed to work with him every week, and him and, you know, Steve Smith, who's another great martial artist. And so I've been working with him for several years and just keep at that. And I got a couple other top level folks I want to go study with. My brain can only handle so much at once. You know?
Right.
So, but I want to keep continuing to be able to train and spread the message. You know, I'm so blessed. It's like music, like training with Bach, Beethoven, and Mozart. They're all three just different grandmasters in the art, making great music, but have a different style and approach. And it's the same thing, the difference between Chuck Norris, Joe Louis, and Bill Wallace. They're all great fighters and instructors and Hall of Famers in their own right, but they have complete different approaches the way they do things. And well, which is better? Well, they're all good. What can I glee from them? And then I'm taking those martial art lessons and applying them to life lessons and to business. You know, an example, you know, Bill Wallace does a power step. So it's different than traditional footwork. It's fantastic. I started, you know, really getting success when I started incorporating that into my arsenal. How do I apply that to business? Well, a lot of times say, well, if we can just increase sales, you know, 10%. Well, no, let's increase them 70%. Oh, that's unreal. We can't do that. Well, let's try. Well, by maybe only hit 50, but that's 4 times what you thought you could do. Mm-hmm. You know, so you needed these stretch goals. It's the same kind of thing, power stepping out there. Joe Louis, he was incredible. He analyzed fighters. He had an approach for any type of fighter that you'd go. A lot of times he'd look at things through a different angle. Instead of going straight on, he'd use zoning and look at a different angle. So same thing when you approach a problem. You don't always hit it head on. Sometimes you got to wait and look at it from a different angle or hear somebody else's different perspective as we're dealing with people. And then Chuck Norris, he was relentless about, we did 10. I think you got 10 more in you. Let's do another 10. Okay, come on, 10 more. He'd take you way beyond what you thought your limit would be. And people don't know, you know, their mind is what quits. Their body will go on forever, you know. So we want to be able to use those lessons from all those different masters and apply them into life skills to improve your quality of life. And that's where I'm at. That's what I'm trying to do.
Well, I love the I call it the forever white belt syndrome, right? Where we're always trying to learn something. Because if we could look through, I mean, gosh, do you remember when you were a white belt and you looked at everything like it was just so brand new? But if we continue to do that all the time, and I love all of the examples that you gave with each one of the men that you explained. I never had the privilege to train with. Well, actually, I take that back. I did train with Bill Wallace one time in a seminar, but never.
Don't miss the opportunity. I'll let you know when he's going to be close by. I'll invite you.
But yeah, I took one seminar once, but never trained with Joe Louis, never trained with Chuck Norris. But I hear stories. You know, I hear the stories through my mentors and my instructors. You know, Dennis Ichikawa and Mark Cox. Those are the 2 instructors that I've trained with all my career. And it's great to hear. You know, I love having martial artists on the show. And I love hearing that constant reminder of we can always be learning something. We can always be improving. And at the same time, take what you've learned and share it with other people and help them do the same in their lives. And if we can continue that, the ripple effect can be tremendous.
I agree. You know, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention a couple other highly influential people back then. Was John Natividad Howard Jackson, the Alegria brothers, Darnell Garcia. They were all on that Chuck Norris team. They were phenomenal guys. Bill Parrott had a school in Granada Hills. Chuck's brother, Aaron Norris, Rick Prieto, Ed Sines. I mean, these were all guys I had the opportunity to train with and looked up to, and that were just huge inspirations to me. And, I was the next generation of those guys.
Well, those are some amazing names. Once again, all names that I've been raised, from a young student to now that those names, ring in my head, the different stories. And I'd love to hear more stories about them at another time. But for now, I just want to say thank you for being on the show. And thank you, everybody, for watching. Thank you for your participation. It looks like a couple people shared our video today. So I'll make sure you get a copy of this this video, and you can continue to share it, because it's really nice for, I think, people even that know you well to be able to hear these stories and to have this this piece as part of your legacy and as part of mine, for being able to have the opportunity to share time with you today. So thank you for being here.
Cool. Thanks so much. God bless you. See you later.
All right, guys. Well, that's it for today. We'll see you next time. And go ahead and please share this video and subscribe to Master Motivation Podcast on YouTube. Take care, guys.